cobblestone streets of 1920s Hanover held a dark and sinister secret. A chill ran down the spines of its terrified citizens, a fear that whispered on the cold night wind. Fritz Haarmann, the Vampire of Hanover, haunted their city. He wasn't a creature of legend, but a monster of real flesh and blood. Haarmann preyed on young men, lured to their doom with promises of food and shelter. But these promises were a one-way ticket to a gruesome and horrifying end. The disappearances started subtly, a slow trickle of lost souls. But as the body count rose, so did the terror. The police were baffled. Who was this monster snatching young men from the streets? The answer, when it finally came, would shock even the most hardened investigator. Fritz Haarmann was no ordinary killer. He was a predator of the worst kind, driven by a bloodlust that seemed to know no bounds. His crimes, a grotesque tapestry of violence and depravity, would forever stain the city of Hanover, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of humanity. Fritz Haarmann's path to becoming a monster began in childhood. His early years were marked by a series of unfortunate events and circumstances that would shape his dark future. Born in Hanover in 1879, he was the youngest and frailest of 6 children. His family lived in a modest home, struggling to make ends meet. The Haarmann household was far from a nurturing environment. His father, a brooding and abusive drunk, reserved his harshest punishments for young Fritz. The elder Haarmann was known for his violent temper and would often take out his frustrations on his youngest son, leaving emotional and physical scars that would never heal. Even at a young age, Haarmann exhibited disturbing behavior. He was often seen as an outcast, unable to connect with his peers. His teachers and neighbors noticed his odd tendencies, but in those times, such behavior was often overlooked or misunderstood. He preferred the company of dolls to other children and developed a strange fascination with death. This morbid curiosity set him apart from other children, who found his interests unsettling. His isolation grew, and with it, his dark thoughts began to take root. He would often torture and kill small animals, a chilling foreshadowing of the horrors he would later inflict on humans. These acts of cruelty were early indicators of a deeply troubled mind, one that found pleasure in the suffering of others. As Haarmann grew older, his behavior became increasingly erratic. His teenage years were marked by a series of escalating incidents that hinted at the darkness within him. He became more defiant, often clashing with authority figures, and showing no remorse for his actions. He engaged in petty theft, ran away from home multiple times, and was eventually sent to a reformatory for his crimes. The reformatory was a harsh environment, meant to discipline and reform troubled youths. But for Haarmann, it only served to deepen his resentment and anger. It was clear that Haarmann was a troubled individual, but no one could have predicted the depths of depravity to which he would sink. His time in the reformatory did little to curb his dark impulses. Instead, it seemed to fuel his desire to rebel against societal norms. His troubled childhood, marked by abuse and neglect, undoubtedly played a role in shaping the monster he would become. The lack of love and support in his formative years left him with a void that he would later try to fill in the most horrific ways. But it was the darkness within him, the twisted desires that festered in his soul, that ultimately drove him to commit such unspeakable acts. The seeds of darkness planted in his youth grew into a monstrous force that would leave a trail of terror in its wake. His story serves as a grim reminder of how a combination of nature and nurture can create a true monster. As Haarmann entered adulthood, his actions became more calculated and sinister. He moved through the shadows of society, preying on the vulnerable and the unsuspecting. His charm and cunning allowed him to mask his true nature, making it easier for him to lure his victims. In the bustling streets of Hanover, Haarmann found ample opportunities to satisfy his dark urges. The city, with its mix of wealth and poverty, provided the perfect hunting ground for a predator like him. He blended in seamlessly, hiding his malevolent intentions behind a facade of normalcy. Despite his efforts to remain undetected, the authorities eventually began to take notice of the disappearances. The police, initially baffled by the lack of evidence, started to piece together the clues that would lead them to Haarmann. His reign of terror was coming to an end, but the scars he left on the community would last forever. Haarmann's trial was a spectacle, drawing attention from all over the country. The details of his crimes shocked the nation, revealing the true extent of his depravity. As the evidence mounted, it became clear that Haarmann was not just a criminal, but a monster born from a lifetime of darkness and despair. In the end, Fritz Haarmann was sentenced to death, his life of horror coming to a fitting conclusion. But the story of his descent into madness serves as a chilling reminder of the potential for evil that lies within us all. The seeds of darkness, once planted, can grow into something truly terrifying. And so, the tale of Fritz Haarmann stands as a testament to the power of the human psyche, both its capacity for good and its potential for unimaginable evil. His life, a tragic blend of nature and nurture, leaves us with a haunting question: what truly makes a monster? By the early 1900s, Haarmann had established a pattern of petty crime and violence. His early years were marked by a series of misdemeanors that painted a grim picture of his future. From a young age, he seemed to be drawn to the darker side of life, engaging in theft and fraud with a disturbing regularity. His actions were not just crimes of opportunity, but seemed to be driven by a deeper, more sinister impulse. He drifted in and out of prison, serving time for theft, fraud, and assault. Each stint behind bars only seemed to harden him further, stripping away any remnants of remorse or empathy. The prison walls that confined him also became the breeding ground for his most malevolent ideas. It was as if each sentence served only to deepen his resolve to continue his life of crime. It was during one of his stints behind bars that he discovered a chilling talent butchering. In the grim confines of the prison workshop, Haarmann found himself drawn to the butchery trade. What started as a mere prison job soon became an obsession. He learned to dismember carcasses with a chilling efficiency, honing his skills until he was practically an expert. The act of cutting through flesh and bone seemed to awaken something dark within him, a macabre fascination that would soon take a horrifying turn. Haarmann learned to dismember carcasses with a chilling efficiency, honing his skills until he was practically an expert. The precision with which he could carve up a carcass was both impressive and terrifying. He took pride in his work, perfecting each cut, each slice, until it became second nature. This gruesome knowledge, acquired in the depths of prison, would later become his signature. It was as if he was preparing for something far more sinister, a dark purpose that was slowly taking shape in his mind. This gruesome knowledge, acquired in the depths of prison, would later become his signature. The tools of the trade, the knives and cleavers, became extensions of his own hands. He knew them intimately, understood their weight and balance, and could wield them with deadly precision. This expertise would soon be put to use in the most horrifying way imaginable. He wouldn't just kill his victims, he would dissect them, scattering their remains like gruesome trophies. Each dismembered body part was a testament to his dark skills, a chilling reminder of the horrors he was capable of. The act of dissection was not just a means to an end for Haarmann. It was an integral part of his twisted ritual. He took a perverse pleasure in the act, reveling in the control it gave him over his victims. Upon his release, Haarmann returned to Hanover, his mind teeming with dark thoughts and twisted desires. The city, with its bustling streets and unsuspecting inhabitants, became his hunting ground. He blended in seamlessly, hiding his true nature behind a facade of normalcy. But beneath the surface, his mind was a maelstrom of dark fantasies and violent urges, all waiting to be unleashed. He set himself up as a small-time butcher and meat vendor, a trade that would provide the perfect cover for his gruesome hobby. The butcher shop, with its blood-stained counters and hanging carcasses, became the perfect front for his dark activities. It was a place where he could indulge his macabre interests without arousing suspicion. The people of Hanover, unaware of the true nature of the man behind the counter, continued to buy their meat from him, oblivious to the horrors that lay hidden beneath the surface. His shop, reeking of blood and offal, became a macabre stage for his darkest fantasies. The smell of raw meat and the sight of blood became a constant reminder of his dark deeds. Each cut of meat, each sausage, was a potential hiding place for his gruesome secrets. The butcher shop was not just a place of business for Haarmann. It was a sanctuary for his twisted soul, a place where he could give free rein to his darkest desires. Little did the people of Hanover know that the man selling them sausages and smoked meats was harboring a horrifying secret. They saw him as just another butcher, a man trying to make a living in a tough world. But behind the friendly facade was a monster, a man who saw them not as customers, but as potential victims. The meat they were buying, sometimes unknowingly, might have come from a far more sinister source than they could ever imagine. The meat they were buying, sometimes unknowingly, might have come from a far more sinister source than they could ever imagine. Each purchase, each bite, was a step deeper into Haarmann's dark world. The people of Hanover, blissfully unaware, continued to buy their meat from him, never suspecting that they were part of a macabre trade that would soon shock the world. As the disappearances in Hanover escalated, so did the whispers. The city, once bustling with the everyday hum of life, now carried an undercurrent of fear. Every corner seemed to hold a shadow, every alley a potential threat. The air was thick with unease, and the once vibrant streets were now haunted by the specter of the unknown. Mothers clutched their sons a little tighter, fear etched on their faces. The bond between parent and child grew even more intense as the looming threat of losing a loved one became a daily terror. Families huddled together, seeking solace in each other's presence, their eyes darting nervously at every unfamiliar face that passed by. The police, under mounting pressure, began to connect the dots. Each new disappearance added another piece to the puzzle, a puzzle that was becoming increasingly sinister. The detectives pored over documents, their faces lined with worry and determination. They knew that time was running out, and the pressure to find the perpetrator was immense. All the victims were young men, most of them transients or runaways, easy prey in the bustling city. These were individuals who had slipped through the cracks of society, their absence often unnoticed until it was too late. The city, with its promise of opportunity, had become a hunting ground for a predator who thrived on the vulnerable. There were rumors, stories whispered in hushed tones, of a strange man seen with the missing boys. The whispers grew louder, spreading like wildfire through the community. Each retelling added a new layer of fear, a new detail to the already terrifying narrative. The man was becoming a figure of legend, a boogeyman whose presence was felt even in his absence. He was described as imposing, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through you. His gaze was said to be unnerving, a look that could strip away the bravado of even the bravest soul. Those who had encountered him spoke of a chilling presence, a man who exuded both charm and menace in equal measure. This man, they said, often promised work and shelter to young men down on their luck. He was a beacon of hope for those who had none, offering a lifeline to the desperate. But behind his benevolent facade lay a darkness that few could have imagined. His promises were a trap, a lure that led the unsuspecting into his clutches. The police, initially dismissive of the rumors, began to take notice. The sheer volume of stories, each eerily similar, could no longer be ignored. They started to see a pattern, a method to the madness that had gripped their city. The detectives listened intently to the locals, their notebooks filling with details that painted a chilling picture. They started questioning locals, piecing together a pattern of Haarmann's movements. Each interview brought them closer to the truth, each piece of information a step towards uncovering the horror that lay beneath the surface. The name Haarmann began to echo through the halls of the police station, a name that would soon become synonymous with terror. They discovered that he was a known police informant, a fact that both intrigued and disturbed them. How could someone so deeply embedded in their own ranks be responsible for such atrocities? The revelation sent shockwaves through the department, raising questions about trust and betrayal. The detectives were now faced with the daunting task of investigating one of their own. What secrets did this man hold? The more they dug, the more they realized that Haarmann was a man of many faces. His life was a labyrinth of lies and deceit, each turn revealing a new horror. The detectives knew that they were only scratching the surface, that the true extent of his crimes was yet to be uncovered. The noose was tightening, even if the police didn't know it yet. Every piece of evidence, every witness statement, was a thread that led them closer to the monster in their midst. The tension was palpable, the sense of impending doom growing with each passing day. The detectives could feel the weight of their task, the responsibility of bringing justice to the victims. They were closing in on a monster, but they were about to uncover a truth far more horrifying than they could have imagined. The reality of Haarmann's actions was beyond their worst nightmares, a tale of brutality and evil that defied comprehension. As they prepared to confront the man who had brought so much pain to their city, they steeled themselves for the horrors that lay ahead. The walls were closing in, and the true face of the monster was about to be